Brian Post here, and welcome to the Great Behavior Breakdown Instructors course with Helene Timpone. Hello, Helene.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. I want to welcome everyone to this introductory training and all of the current GBB instructors and all of the future GBB instructors. We're extremely excited to have you. We're extremely excited about this program. And we are extremely excited about the love revolution we are pushing forward in the midst of fear. And today what we're going to do in session 1 is we're going to talk about your instructor's manual. We'll look at your agenda here, our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about the class itself, just have a little introduction. We'll talk about the purpose of the course, and then I'm going to actually go through session 1 so that you'll have it to listen to and take notes from, and you can listen to it over and over and over again. And then Helene will be talking about finding space for your class, the participants' costs, getting the books, and then at the end of the class we're going to have Tim Nardoni come on, and he's going to be talking to us about the post-affiliate program, which is a way that you can supplement your income as a part of doing these classes. So I hope that you enjoy the class and are able to get a lot of good information out of it. I'm going to switch over to the instructor's manual now, and everyone should have that. But then find it very beneficial. So when we start out with the instructor's guide, you will have your guides mailed to you. All the instructors will have their instructor's manual mailed to them, and you are also going to receive complimentary of Post-Institute and Associates 10 participants manuals to get you started. So that'll get you off and running, and your parents, your professionals who participate in your class, they can either buy the books online, and we hope to have that set up with your affiliate links embedded in them for your classes, or you can purchase them wholesale from Post-Institute and Associates, and Helene will be talking more about that this evening, or at the end of the call, towards the end of the call. So your instructor's guide is set up in this way. We've got 4 sessions that each manual covers. The first section we're going to cover today. That's the core concepts of the Great Behavior Breakdown. Session 2 will be covering lying and the 3-phase intervention. Session 3 covers stealing and containment, and Session 4 covers defiance and feedback loops. What's important to understand is the purpose of this class is to start to help the participants establish a foundation for the stress model, for the Great Behavior Breakdown approach, for this love-based approach that we are trying to push forward. So the overall goal is to establish a foundation. So you'll notice during the 4 classes, we're not going to cover everything post. We're just going to cover the basics of foundation. You want to encourage your participants to come back as often as they possibly want to. In fact, the more you can get participants to come back and take part in 2nd classes and 3rd classes, the more you're able to develop a sense of leadership in the course. So you have other parents who've been through the course and who have been practicing at home. They come back to your class the 2nd time, and they're able to give more feedback. They're able to have more insights, and that just assists the new participants who are coming in. That assists their learning and assists their paradigm shift. So each of the manuals has a number of things already established inside of it. You got your teaching content, which we'll go through, your group and individual activities that Helene has inserted into the manual, and then in your appendix you have your sign-in sheet, your sample illustrations of feedback loops, the fear-based feedback loops versus the love-based feedback loops. You have class certificates, and you have course evaluations. Some of the stuff will be emailed to you so you can make the correct adjustments with your own name and location and all that information, but you know what you're going to be receiving, what you're going to need to have for your class. Here's a little checklist here that kind of goes through the things that you're going to need. You need your pins, your tags, your markers, your sign-in sheet, your participant workbooks, which you should always have some extras there, because participants, they might not start out with a workbook, but as you can see the workbook, it's very nice, very well put together. And the participants manual itself comes with a getting started audio CD in the back. They're going to want one, and so you want to have those there available that they can purchase from you for retail. Bottles of water, if you have them, or a water station. You have your Great Behavior Breakdown books there also, and then preferably a whiteboard or flip chart and the appropriate pins that need to go along with it. Now, what's important there is, and Helene and I have kind of gone back and forth about, do we want to put this into a PowerPoint presentation? And the thing is we don't want these courses to be conducted in a manner of your traditional lecture workshop. We actually want participation from the participants. We want interaction. We want the instructors to be able to read something from the instructor's manual and then ask for feedback, ask for insights. That's how you develop that ongoing camaraderie. That's how you're able to create that sense of familiarity with your members when they can start to be open, they can start to share information with one another, and that group cohesion. See, the real advantage, and we have this set up where you can basically do it two different ways. You can actually do the program through the 4 weeks, which is what's preferred, or it can actually be done in a one-day, kind of a one-day, all-day format, a traditional lecture format. The problem with doing it in the one-day is that, yes, you have an opportunity to get a lot of interaction and you share a lot of information in the course of that day, but you don't have the opportunity to develop the cohesiveness of a group. And the problem with that is that until you develop that group cohesiveness, until you can increase that camaraderie around your participants, you can't really start to develop your Great Behavior Breakdown community. And that's really what we want to do. We want to develop and create Great Behavior Breakdown communities all across the country and in other countries as well. In any given month, we would like to have several of these classes going on, so that they are accessible on a very large scale. That's how we, as a few passionate, inspired individuals, are going to make a difference in the world. And that's the ultimate goal of this program, is to make a difference in the world and in the lives of families, in the lives of children, in the lives of parents. So just to get started with your course, the first thing you want to do is you want to start off with some introductions. You want to talk about who you are, share about your family, where it is that you come from. You can share your education, you can share the fact that you're a therapist, you share the fact that you're a parent, just self-disclose. Share, become a personality that people are attracted to. They want to know you. And even though this is information based off the Great Behavior Breakdown book that I wrote, and Helene's the director of the program and the author of these manuals, you want to be able to ensure that people come to identify you as the lead in the course. I mean, you want to create a community, not just for the purpose of the Great Behavior Breakdown, but you want to create a community that comes to see you as the leader of this class, the person who is familiar with the information, the person who's available there to support, the person who's available there to guide you. And the purpose of that, the reason, is because these classes and this community that you're building have the opportunity to create a possible revenue stream for you and for your family to supplement your income. And so it can also be a way that you can supplement your cost of living. And so not only are you making a difference in the lives of other people, but you're also making a difference in the life of your own family. What better thing to do than to be compensated for the time that you're away from your family And in addition to that time being away from your family, you're also being compensated in changing the lives of other people. Would you agree with that, Helene?
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to mention here is that you start to have people introduce themselves. It just like any normal group process. Ask where people are from. Ask what brings them to the class. A lot of times in these kind of courses, self-disclosure is pretty natural. As soon as we're given permission to open up and kind of be where we are, we can communicate and just be open, and you're creating a trusting, loving, non-judgmental, non-shaming, non-blaming environment where people can really start to delve into their own self-awareness, their own self-understanding, so that they can see how to make changes in the lives of their child. Now, you have to kind of measure that according to the size of your group. It's very important. Typically in the camps, the parenting camps that I lead, as long as I don't have more than 20 individuals, then I usually give everyone an opportunity to kind of share about who they are, where they're from, and what brought them, what they hope to get out of the class. And that usually leads to some additional sharing. And 20 is oftentimes a pretty big group. And the reason I say that is because if you're trying to conduct these courses and the information itself is set up to cover anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours, if you have 15 people, you're going to run into a good hour of time just having people introduce themselves. So you really got to be mindful of that, and you might have to instruct the people who are sharing to try to keep it brief, because you don't want to take up the whole evening just doing introductions. So you have some flexibility with that. Typically, if you get over 15 to 20 participants, that the most you're going to be able to share is just a name and where they're from before you have to start getting into the information, simply because that part of getting started can take a long time. So you want to provide an overview. You want to have some basic guidelines for the class. It's based off of the Great Behavior Breakdown book. Everyone has to have the book to come into the class. That way you have a better chance of being able to assign some homework assignments, to open up some different processing. When you ask people questions, they might not have questions that go right along with the manual. And that's why it's very important that you too are familiar with the GBB. And as an instructor, I highly recommend that you have the audio program, and you can get that from postinstitute.com. The GBB instructor, the audio program is 13 CDs covering everything step by step that the book covers, except you got me teaching it to you over and over and over again. And so that's just repetition for you. So you want to help everyone understand that the class is going to really be focused on helping them understand the concepts and the application. So it's going to be really interactive. The more interactive they can be, the more engaging and energetic the group itself will be, and the more open people will be. You want to also make it clear that people are welcome to not participate in any activity. Remember, this is not about blame. It's not about shame. It's about giving people the opportunity to choose, to make decisions, to be informed for their own sense of self-empowerment and their own sense of growth. So anyone who doesn't feel comfortable in any exercise, they don't have to participate. They can just set to the side. They can observe. If they want to go out and take a break, they can do that. But in a manner of really ensuring security and trust, I like to try to make sure everyone at least stays in the room. Like you don't have to participate, but at least stay in the room and try, if at all possible, to only go to the restroom when you have a short break. And typically a class of this length, you're not going to have, you might have a short break, but it would be only brief, 5-10 minutes. The other thing you really want to do is that when you're first introduced in the class, talk about confidentiality. Talk about the fact that, there's sensitive information being shared in here, and though you all might not know one another directly or specifically and interact with one another, please be mindful and conscientious of the information that's shared and maintain it within the integrity of our group. So don't go out and start talking about someone else's story or someone else's experience. Try to maintain confidentiality within a group. The other thing is, if people share a difficult situation, try to avoid giving them direct feedback, especially during breaks, or providing that feedback to other people, unless they give you permission. So if someone comes up to you and kind of asks you about a really challenging situation, then just say, you know what, that's a great thing. I would really prefer to keep that within the group because your sharing is going to benefit someone else. And if we're going to talk about that issue, I'd like for everyone to be able to get as much of a benefit out of it as possible. Now, if you need to and the situation is really challenging, remember, these are not therapy groups. This is not a therapy course. You're not there to fix anyone's problem. You're just there to provide a foundation of understanding and support and guidance so they can start to create some solutions in their own lives. But a lot of families will come and they will have exceptional needs, and therefore you might, at the end of the class, agree to do some Q&A with them or some processing with them, or even at the end of the class offer them some coaching services or some other supportive services that will be available, and you just have to be sure you check the website in case you want to say to someone, it'd really be good if you attended a parenting camp, because I can see that we're not going to be able to cover the degree, the in-depth detail that needs to be addressed here. And then also always ask permission to share someone else's story, even in the group. And so just keep in mind that you're setting a loving environment for folks. You don't want folks to feel judged. You don't want them to feel like they are wrong. You really want to help them to feel supported and encouraged, and that way they can get as much out of the seminar as they possibly can. So let's talk about a little bit on down from there. Be sure, let me scroll down here just a little bit. Be sure to help your class transition and get ready to have fun. Okay, it's an educational environment, it's a learning environment, it's an empowerment environment, it's a supporting environment. Life is very serious for these families anyway. They are oftentimes under a lot of stress. They oftentimes feel helpless. They don't know where to turn, and so you want to give them an opportunity to also get some relief from the class. So you want to have some fun. You take a serious topic and you try to have some fun with it. You try to mix it up a little bit, even though you're going to have some emotions. There are going to be some people that become sad, they cry, they might feel angry. You want to encourage all that. You want to make that okay, but at the same time, you want to be able to keep it light. You want to be able to keep it educational. You want to be able to keep it fun. But you do want to address that emotional experience, and you don't want to discount that because that is such an important part of what we do. Now, if you're running multiple classes, is a very important point. You might want to not have people missing core concepts. It's one, if they miss session 1 and then they come to session 2, they've already missed the foundation of the model. So when you think about running multiple classes, you want to make sure that people always start with class 1 or with session 1 so that they're getting that foundation of understanding. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'll be covering it again in session 2. the understanding is more important than anything. If people miss the understanding, that is the foundation of the paradigm shift. And this is what this information is. It is a paradigm shift of information. So it is a different way of thinking, a different way of acting, a different way of seeing, a different way of talking, a different way of feeling. You really want to help them have that foundational understanding. So it's important that they get this initial session. And then why some of this information might seem repetitive, understand that a significant part of a paradigm shift is repetition. You know, when I did the Great Behavior Breakdown audio program, I covered those core concepts with each session. So over and over and over, repetition, repetition, repetition. And I know that many of you teaching this course and listening to this webinar training have maybe gone to camps, you've gone to lectures, you've got the materials, you've been watching this stuff, you've been doing it, you've been listening to it for a year, 2, 3 years, and now you're hearing me talk about it again. Well, it's the same thing, repetition, repetition, repetition. You got to know this stuff like the back of your hand, and not only that, beyond your head, I want you to know it in your heart. So let's talk about session 1. We start off here. We have this funny little cartoon. See if I can expand it a little bit, called Baby Blues. It says the mom's saying to the dad, Hammy was being a total brat this afternoon, and Dad says, oh, what did you do? Well, when he gets like that, it just means that he needs some attention. So after I put Rin down for a nap, I made us a couple of banana splits. Dad says, wow. Then we read his favorite book. I gave him a foot rub, and we snuggled together on the couch and watched a movie. He's been a perfect angel ever since, and Dad's kind of standing there in amazement, and then Dad thinks to himself, I want to be a brat. That's such a classic cartoon for this model. It's so funny that we would actually find that. So talking about the core concepts, let's get into it. What this section covers is learning how to achieve a new level of understanding by examining our current paradigm, which is the traditional paradigm, which is a fear-based paradigm. Those might be two very big terms I just used, and confusing and sometimes overwhelming. Traditional, the common historical way that we've gone about working with kids, the common historical way that we've gone about dealing with behaviors. A different paradigm is changing the way we think about things. So looking at these things in a complete different way. And we're going to talk about what stress is. And we're going to look at the stress model. Then we're going to learn 2 ways to respond. And then we're going to talk about discovering how stress affects your levels of memory. So you start your class off. You open by explaining the below. Is our immediate tendency to reject anything new when we've been taught to see children and their behaviors in a certain way, and change is never easy. See, it's very important that we understand that when we first start out being introduced to a concept, we immediately want to reject it. We immediately want to reject the concept of even that we parent traditionally, or even that traditional parenting is based in fear. See, we don't see ourselves as operating from a fear-based perspective, and the reason is because we don't see it. We don't look at it. We don't think about it. Rarely do we consider ourselves as operating from a place of fear even. Typically we feel like we're doing okay, or we're pretty calm. We're the parent who says, you know, when I was spanking him, I wasn't scared of anything. I was angry, but I wasn't scared. See, that's what we want to be. That's the kind of paradigm that we want to be able to explore. We want to get more in-depth, and we want to take a closer look at. You might find that these concepts are very different from your customary way of thinking. For this reason, they may be difficult for you to accept at first. What's required is a paradigm shift, a new perspective. So what does that take? What does it take to create a paradigm shift? Now, science tells us that 2 things go into creating a paradigm shift: the emotional impact and repetition. Participants in your class are most likely going to get both of those things. They're going to get emotional impact, and they're going to get repetition. So number 1, it takes a willingness and an effort to embrace new concepts. Just a willingness, okay? Just a willingness to be open to exploring new concepts. It can be very scary to change something you've always thought was true, just like children being willfully disobedient and defiant, and intentionally misbehaving, or children doing things because they don't have a conscience. These are all very traditional ways of thinking about things. But in order to change paradigms, you just have to have a willingness to even begin to question and to challenge the things that you've always believed to be true. It takes repetition and emotional impact. Emotional impact occurs when you see the techniques working or when you feel it in your bones. See, when you go through these role plays and these scenarios, and when people are sharing these stories, and you can really hone in on that emotional expression and that emotional feeling, you know, when you say to that parent or that professional who's participating, how did that make you feel? And they say, well, it made me angry. You know, slow down at that moment. Slow down and say, no, how did that really make you feel? Breathe in to your body. Connect to your body. How did that make you feel? Let them really engage at an emotional level. Let them really connect to that emotion, because that's so important in them being able to make a big shift. And then you must become educated and develop new awareness, and you must develop a complete understanding of the new information. So as you're doing this, you're educating yourself, which is left hemisphere, very cognitive, okay? We are unfortunately at the, what's the word? We are at the, it's not at the disposal, it's not at the, we're not hostage, we are at the, I can't think of the word, but we are, what's the word I'm thinking of, Helene?
At the will of others?
You're at the will?
Yeah, it's not the word you're looking for either.
Not the word. But, you know, when we are limited by one way of doing things, and the way that we're limited is we are limited by sharing this information in a cognitive format, which is a talking format. So it's a very left hemisphere format. And the reality is that this information, the application of this information, the practice of this information is very emotional. It's very right hemisphere. So that's why you've got to have that emotional impact. That's why you got to go in deep with people, even at this foundational level, even within this hour and a half, this 2 hours. You really got to engage them emotionally, because when they go home, it's not the thinking that's going to benefit them. It's not the thinking that's going to create the transformation, the love revolution in their home. It's the emotion. When they make the emotional shift, that's what's going to make the difference. And I'll tell a little story here about Dr. Spock. He changed his paradigms when he was late in the 80s. He came to believe that he'd contribute to the traumatizing of a nation by encouraging parents to cry themselves to sleep. And he took it back. You know, he said, you know, it's not okay. I think there's a different way to look at things. And you know, he was what I admire about that is that he was willing, once he learned that he had been wrong, he was willing to come back and say, you know what, that this isn't the case. You know, there is a different way of looking and doing things. And what neuroscience later demonstrated to us is that infants don't even have the ability to regulate themselves. They don't even have the ability to calm themselves down. So it's important that we address that. And then John Bowlby says, the first 3 years of our lives establish the blueprints of all of our future relationships. You know, the first 3 years of our lives establish the blueprints for all of our future relationships. So those early blueprints have an impact on us for the rest of our lives. So you think about that, you know, you encourage your participants to think about that in the context of their children. You know, what were their children's first 3 years of life like? What were their, as the participants, what were their first 3 years of life like? And a lot of times you just have to generalize by saying, you know, well, here's what I know of my mom and dad, where they lived, what they did for a living, the environmental, cultural circumstances at the time. So you help them generalize about whether there was not much stress, whether it was a pretty enjoyable place, or whether there was a lot of stress. You help them make some of those connections. And then research also tells us that the ability to calm ourselves, in fact, the statistic says that it is believed that affect dysregulation is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. So it is believed that affect dysregulation is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders, which simply means it is believed that being stressed out is a fundamental cause to all the psychiatric disorders that we see with children. So think about that. You know, that's something worth talking about. I mean, that's one of those, you know, as far as I'm concerned, principles of family-centered regulatory parenting and therapy. One of those guiding research findings that really changes the way that I see and the way I do and engage other people based on that one little finding. It is believed that being stressed out is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. You could probably have a 2-hour conversation just about that one scientific fact alone. What does that mean to parents? If their child is stressed out, if their child has been diagnosed with 5 different disorders, you know, ADHD, RADD, oppositional defiant disorder, bipolar, depression, what if, is the question I like to ask, what if the fundamental root of all of those diagnoses are stress? What if? And then what can parents do with that? What can they, you know, just from that one little thought, that one little concept, what can they do? What can they do if that's the case? So then again, you want to slow down. You want to breathe. You want to encourage the parents to breathe, because at this point you could have already given a tremendous amount of information. It's got to be overwhelming, because the message itself is overwhelming, because it's so contrary to what we typically do. But you just get them to slow down. You get them to do some thinking, and one of the beauties of these manuals is that they can actually write in them while they're working, and go back and review them later. Okay, so you allow everyone a few moments to examine their belief systems by answering the questions below. You answer them first and use yours as an example, then try the following. Process for a few minutes about their answers. The point of the questions is to help members recognize what they wanted to do as a parent and what they currently do, and how that varies, and why. And then you talk about that explanation. Our dominant belief systems, paradigms are in control. In order to challenge them, we need emotional impact, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, the other, an example is we preach timeout and other fear-based intervention as an alternative to hitting our children. So how we move within the same paradigm, you know, maybe we stopped spanking our children, but instead of spanking, we ended up doing timeout, you know, and exploring that and exploring some of the connections and how they can be so similar, and how we want to truly do something different. So some of those questions: what were the core messages your parents taught? You know, and if you got a nice sized group, you can have people break up into small groups and they can talk about this information. How did they discipline you? What do you do differently? What did you want to do differently? So you talk about what do you do differently as a parent. Maybe you don't do anything differently. And then you talk about what did you want to do differently when you were thinking about becoming a parent, or before you had this child, or as you were raising this child. What were the things you thought you wanted to do differently, and then what did you end up doing? So it's very important. And again, you know, you can really cover a good deal of information as you're going through the course. I'm just going to back up a little bit. Sorry about that. So then we're going to move to the stress model. First and most important, review the stress model on the 3 principles along the right-hand side of the page. Emphasize their importance so that your members understand why you'll be reviewing them at the beginning of each class. Okay, those core concepts is the core of everything else you will learn to read in this book. You have to make that point. If you can't embrace the 3 foundational principles of the stress model, it will be hard to apply the information. Refer to this model often and remind yourself frequently of the 3 principles. What I really encourage people to do is memorize the stress model. Memorize it. You can have them come back, you know, give that as a homework assignment. When you guys come back next week, I want everyone to be able to recite the stress model. I'd like everyone to be able to draw the stress model. I'd like for everyone to be able to say, all behavior arises from a state of stress. In between behavior and stress is the presence of a primary emotion. There are only 2 primary emotions, love and fear. It's through the expression and processing understanding of the fear that we calm the stress and diminish the behavior. You know, everybody needs to be able to do that. They need to internalize that, even at a cognitive level. even if it's just that cognitive level in that moment, their ability to internalize that. And you remember this as a child. You remember when you had to recite a poem at church, or as you got a little older, you remembered your favorite poem, or you remembered your favorite, your quote, or whatever it is. It becomes a part of you that never goes away. Years later, you can recite that. And so it's so important. And I remember when I was like in the 6th grade, I was taking karate classes. And I took karate classes maybe for like 3 months. I ended up earning an orange belt or something. But to this day, I can still remember my karate kata to this day because I had to learn it. I had to make it a part of me. And that's the same thing you want to do with the stress model, is you really want to help people to make this a part of their everyday life. And so then you review the stress model by providing an example. You can use a client story. You can use one of your own to illustrate it. Then you have each participant think of a recent event, a recent behavior, and work backwards to fill in the stress model. So you want to actually take it and you want to actually have them look at it. Have them write the behaviors down, Have them then go back and underneath those behaviors come all the way down to stress and have them examine it and see if they can identify when the stress might have set in. And see, a lot of times people are they're looking to see the stressor. See, the key is you're probably not going to see the stressor. See, the stress model says all behavior arises from a state of stress. The reality is, and I'll reinforce this again in class 2, in session 2, is that you can experience and do experience stress through any of your sensory pathways, through what you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste. So any of your sensory pathways can cause you a stress reaction, and the reality, according to Bruce Lipton, and again, I'll be saying this again because I want you to have that repetition, is that in times of stress, our cellular system constricts into survival. So the moment we become stressed, we literally constrict into survival, and your body only knows 2 states, surviving and thriving. So you're either in a closed, shut down, constricted, surviving state, or you're in an open, available, responsive, thriving state. So ask your participants, where are you guys at right now? When you came here tonight, where were you at? When you dealt with your child's behavior, where were you at? You think about that. You think about that in a way, and you're able to help them to process and understand, that at a deeper level, what it is that what it is that you're trying to communicate. And as you can do that, then you're going to find that they start to internalize the message a little bit better. But again, the 3 core principles, number 1, all behavior arises from a state of stress. In between the behavior and the stress is the presence of a primary emotion. It's through the expression, the processing, and the understanding of the emotion that we calm the stress and diminish the behavior. There's only 2 primary emotions, love and fear. You're not always going to know what causes fear because fear is intimately tied into stress. So all your body system has to do is to become stressed, and it moves immediately into fear. So there are all manner of things that can cause you fear. There are all manner of things that cause you stress, and it's also important to understand that there are, Hans Selye, the father of stress, identified 3 kinds of stress. He said there's eustress, which is good stress. It helps you fight diseases. It helps you fight illness. It helps you overcome pain. See, all stress is not bad. Stress has a very good, useful component. It keeps us healthy. It keeps us alive. He also said there's such form of stress called distress. This is the state of stress associated with dysregulation. When you are dysregulated and you're in a state of distress, you are stressed out. This is the form of stress that leads to psychiatric disorders. This is the form of stress that causes high blood pressure, migraines, fibromyalgia, ulcers. That's the kind of stress that we're trying to combat, because that's the kind of stress that's not good stress, it's bad stress. And the 3rd kind of stress, according to Dr. Selye, is the stress of life. It's just the everyday stress associated with being in this world, waking up, getting in a shower, having all the different chlorines and chloroforms invade your body, eating food. It's just a stress of life. It's a normal part of stress. So you think about that, you really spend time talking to the families about fear, analyzing the fear, looking at it, and then you talk a little more about the primary emotions, really helping them to see their own behavior, because I like to look at the stress model as an interactive model, that when we are dealing with our children and we're talking about the stress model, we can look at any of the behaviors. So, whether it's lying or whether it's stealing, whether it's defiance, it doesn't matter. Look at any of the behaviors, and that behavior is arising from a state of stress. That stress is driving and leading to a primary emotion. If it's negative behavior, it's negative stress. Our goal is to calm the fear and the stress to help us move into a state of love, which then helps us diminish the behavior. That's our goal. But what we have to understand is that the stress model is an interactive model, and I didn't forget to hook up my little ink pen. It'd be a lot clearer for you guys. But it's an interactive model in that these negative behaviors that our children demonstrate do what? They cause us stress. And that stress causes what? It drives our fear. And that fear does what? It drives our negative behavior. So see, one of the first things you got to do with the stress model is you got to be willing to engage and calm your own stress and your own fear so that you can shift over to a space of love, so that you can then address your child's behavior from a love-based place as opposed to a fear-based place, because you can't overcome stress and fear by creating more stress and fear. Now, let's talk about love. Love is the space in between. I'll be sure to reinforce this again in session 2. It exists. The only thing that keeps us out of fear is the experience of love. The problem is we don't know what love is. Our traditional parenting practices are not based in love. Our traditional parenting practices are based in fear. So what many of us grew up understanding is my parent is hitting me because they love me, or they're grounding me because they love me, or they're yelling at me because they love me, or they're doing all these negative things to me, all these things that induce stress and fear to me because they love me. Well, see, that's the illusion of love. The illusion of love says we don't know what love is because what we've grown up with is fear, and that is fear disguised as love. See, that's what we really have to challenge. That's what we really have to look at. So really spend time talking about the difference between love and fear, and the what is involved in a state of love. When you think about love, you think about understanding, you think about patience, you think about flexibility, you think about responsibility, and then think about what's involved with fear: blame, shame, reactivity, being controlling. The only time you seek to control is when you're in a state of stress and fear. Otherwise, you don't seek to control, you seek to create love. So it's very important to keep in mind. So that's the second principle. And then the third principle, and let me get my little ink pen off here. The third principle is, oh shoot, sorry about that. The third principle is that children with severe behaviors do not consciously choose to act out the behavior. These behaviors are driven from a highly unconscious place. Children are not intentionally choosing to act out these behaviors. These are stress and fear-based behaviors, and that's what's driving the behavior, and it comes from an unconscious and unknowing place. If a child could do something different in that moment, they would. But oftentimes, because they're in stress, because they're in survival, they can't do anything different. So it's very important to spend time really helping parents grasp that understanding and exactly what that means. And then we're going to talk about dysregulation. There's two terms we use: dysregulation and regulation. Regulation is the experience of stress within your window of tolerance. Okay, as long as you can sit still and you can focus, you can interact, you can engage, you can laugh, you can love, you be happy, etc. You go to work, you do your job effectively. That's a state of regulation. Dysregulation, however, is the experience of stress outside of your window of tolerance. That's the state associated with being stressed out. Now, Dr. Bruce Perry identifies the states of stress. He says we all respond to stress in one of two different ways. We become hyper-aroused or we become hypo-aroused. So in our stress, we become more aggressive, we tend more towards fight, or we tend to become depressed and we flee or we freeze. Okay, because there's fight, flight, and freeze. And we just added the freeze reaction over the last 20 years, and you hear me saying the word reaction instead of response, because I don't believe that we have a stress response. I believe we have a stress reaction, and the difference is that reacting is without thought. It's very unconscious. Responding is with thought, and it's very conscious. So you think about this also in the context, according to Joseph Ledoux, in times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. So you think about when your child becomes hyper-aroused or they become hypo-aroused, they're in that state of dysregulation, they're not thinking clearly. Not only are they not thinking clearly, but they are actually they can't remember. They don't have an effective short-term memory. And so that's how we look at dysregulation. And we also understand that our behavior is an attempt to bring ourselves back into a state of regulation, a calmer state, no longer in stress overload. What does that mean exactly? That in any given moment, you are doing the absolute best that you can. In any given moment, that child is doing the absolute best that child can do. And that action, that behavior, even the one that seems so abnormal, the one that seems to drive you crazy, that behavior is geared towards trying to return to a state of balance. It is geared towards trying to get back to a regulated place. It's the paradox of stress and fear, however. The paradox of stress and fear is that they lead us to do the exact opposite of what is in our best interest. So you think about those two things. And then we talk here about your window of tolerance, the state of stress within your window of tolerance. We all grow up and we have this established window of tolerance, and it's the ability to handle stress. You know, you take your hands, you separate them by a couple feet. Let's say that's your window of tolerance. But the more stressed you become, you bring those hands in a little closer, the smaller your window of tolerance gets, therefore, the less stress you can handle. Now, when you've experienced trauma, now let's say I say take your two hands and put them 2 feet apart. When you've experienced trauma, take your two hands and put them 1 foot apart. Okay, and let's say a half a foot apart, 6 inches apart. That's your window of tolerance for stress, because trauma makes you very sensitive to stress. It makes you very fearful. That's what I like to say about these children. They're stress sensitive and fearful. So their window of tolerance gets brought in very, very small. So they can't handle very much stress. And what happens when they become stressed and they exceed their window of tolerance? They act out. That's when you get behavior problems. And if that happens time and time again, month after month, what eventually happens is that this becomes a chronic conditioned state. And it's very hard to shift these states because parents oftentimes become as conditioned for the stress and fear as the child is. And then when you get to that place, you're actually creating what is called a negative feedback loop, a conditioned negative feedback loop, where the energy and the vibration of negativity from one person is impacting and creating that negative, stressful vibration with another person, and then that loop just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we want to do is we want to be able to create positive feedback loops. So you're looking at the states of arousal. I don't know why I keep doing that. You're looking at the states of arousal. The reality is that there are 2/3 more girls diagnosed with depression than there are boys, and there are 2/3 more boys diagnosed with aggression than there are girls. But obviously, these two states can flip back and forth. You know, spend some time talking about, you know, with adults, especially with men and women, that as men become more stressed, they actually tend more towards hypoarousal, as opposed to when women become more stressed, they have a tendency to lean towards the hyperarousal. So then we ask the question, can you give specific examples of your behaviors in either state, such as watching TV or cleaning the house? You know, so you're thinking about how are you dealing with stress? And you deal with stress by getting busy in a hyper-aroused state, or you deal with stress by vegging out in front of the television in a hypo-aroused state. So just give, try to have some examples. It says in the above activity, have the participants write what their own aroused behaviors look like, help them understand that what we can see within ourselves, we can see in others. That's so important to the paradigm shift. And then finally, you're going to talk about the 4 levels of memory. Very important to kind of help people grasp. The cognitive level of memory is number 1. Cognitive means mental memory. We are typically only operating out of our conscious cognitive memory about 10% of the time. The other 90% of the time, it's mostly unconscious. You have your emotional memory. Only 10% of the time are you really aware of what you're feeling emotionally. So you have your cognitive memory, which is your names, your phone numbers, your birth dates, your directions, those sorts of things. And then you have an emotional memory. Every cognitive memory has an emotion attached to it. That is very important. Let me have a little drink here. Every cognitive memory has an emotional memory attached to it, which is either love or fear. And what you have to understand about feelings and emotions, just to clarify that point. An emotion is energy in motion. Your body only knows 2 states, thriving and surviving. A feeling is the cognitive perception of emotion. So your brain actually perceives an energy and calls it a feeling. Very important. And underneath your emotional memory is your motor memory. This is your walking, your talking, your eyes blinking, your fingers moving, you're writing with your pen right now. That's almost 100% of the time unconscious, which means rarely do you stop and think about how you're putting on your shoes. Rarely do you stop and think about how you're putting on your underwear, then your jeans, and then your sock, and then your T-shirts, or when you're brushing your teeth. And then underneath that is the state level of memory. What's important about the state level of memory is, according to Dr. Bruce Perry, states becomes traits of our personality, and trauma gets stored at the state level of memory. When the state level of memory is triggered, it directs all the other levels of memory. So if you have a child who has experienced trauma, that trauma is at a state level of memory, which means that trauma and the feelings associated with that trauma now can become an ingrained part of this child, of the rest of this child's personality, And when stress sets in, that state level of memory gets triggered, and it directs what they do with their body and their behaviors. It directs how they feel emotionally, and it also directs their thinking. And remember, stress causes confused and distorted thinking and suppresses the short-term memory. And I gave a little story. I was in a lecture once, and a lady came up and said, you know what, this makes absolute sense. When I was a little girl, and my whole life, even as an adult, I've been terrified of birds. I never knew what was going on with birds, why I was so afraid of birds. But I was really scared of birds. She said, I just realized that when I was 7 years old, I watched my sister get attacked in the backyard by a chicken. Imagine that. This is a grown woman, a social worker, I think she's a therapist, and she had been held hostage by the fear of birds, because all the way back to when she was 7 years old, she watched her sister get attacked by a chicken. And she has been terrified of birds ever since then. And you think about feathers, you think about flying. She said it's so bad, it has been so bad, that I will walk out into my car, I will run to my car, and if I get in my car and there's a bird sitting on the car, I cannot move. I am frozen. See, this is state level memory. It's a grown professional woman. State level memory gets triggered. Trauma gets triggered. Her body freezes. Her emotions move right into fear. We're talking about a little bird. Her thinking becomes confused and distorted. And this woman was standing in front of me. She said, I will beg that bird, please get off of my car. And I cannot move until that bird leaves. And then I can drive to work. See, that's the power of state level memory. especially when trauma gets stored down there. So we can talk a little bit about trauma. Traumatic memories reside in the state level memory. When something happens that triggers a state level memory, it directs all the other levels. Remember, trauma is any stressful event number one, any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable. So it can be any manner of events. It can be traumatic events. And then some additional points that you can discuss. When you take a child out of a traumatic situation, rarely do children get out of the trauma themselves. See, you can take a child out of a traumatic environment, you can take them out of a traumatic situation, but rarely does the child actually get out of the trauma. So the trauma gets carried with them. It doesn't matter how many years ago the actual trauma occurred, because that trauma impacted this child's ability to regulate, meaning that memory, that experience is stored at that amygdala level, stored at the brain receptor level. And when that happens, then the child is not able to move forward. They're not able to do anything differently. Okay? And the cells of our bodies hold trauma lifelong. So the cells of your body hold on to these negative, painful experiences. When that happens, you can't just move out of the experience. It makes it really difficult to be able to move on. Can someone mute you guys' phone out, if possible? I keep picking up some background noise. And then a traumatic event is any stressful event that is prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable. That's the second part. So a traumatic event is any stressful event, and the second part is when it's prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable. When those events go on unexpressed, unprocessed, and misunderstood, that makes the difference between short-term trauma versus long-term trauma. Very important point. And that brings you to the end of session 1, and as you can tell, that is a lot of information to cover, but you're going to leave people walking out of your class just feeling absolutely blown away with the insights that they're having, and that's just session 1. And you should feel really good. You should feel really good about yourself when you get through session 1, because you've just provided a lot of information. You said something, Helene?
Yeah, I said, did you want to touch on the oxytocin piece? Because while that's not added to the manual, it will be. If by the time they're reading this, it may already be in there.
Okay, yeah, sure. Let's just go up a little bit. And when we start thinking about dysregulation, when we start thinking about the stress model, here's something very important to remember. It's a new science, new research. It says that when you become stressed, you have this flood of stress hormones that pass through this part of your brain that is also simultaneously supposed to release another hormone. That hormone is called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the anti-stress hormone. So this is very important. The oxytocin response, okay, see there's a stress reaction, yet there's an oxytocin response, because the stress reaction happens automatically. The oxytocin response is a learned response, so when you become stressed, the oxytocin switch gets triggered, and it releases oxytocin, which is to help you calm down. But because oxytocin is a learned response, if you didn't get the early nurture, the early interaction, the early soothing that is required for optimal development, then your oxytocin response doesn't turn on as well or as efficiently, so you can actually be left in a prolonged, overwhelming state of stress and fear, and your oxytocin response is not kicking in adequately, therefore your anti-stress hormones are not operating, therefore your stress becomes more chronic. This was what leads to ongoing behaviors. Now, here's the beautiful thing about it, is that oxytocin can actually be taught. However, it requires your calm presence. The way you engage oxytocin in another individual is by being calm and present. If you're not calm and present, when that other person is stressed out, when that other person is in a place of fear, you're not going to be able to turn on your oxytocin response. Therefore, you're not going to be able to turn on their oxytocin response. But if you can meet their stress, and if you can meet their fear with oxytocin, by being calm and being present, and you can trigger oxytocin through looking at someone. You can trigger oxytocin by being calm and just listening. You can trigger oxytocin by touching, by hugging. You can trigger oxytocin by singing a song. You can trigger oxytocin by sharing a favorite meal. You can trigger oxytocin through playful wrestling and laughter. So see, there are some very simple ways that you can turn on oxytocin, and as you're able to begin turning it on, you begin teaching your child how to have an oxytocin response. That really is the other side of the stress model, is that it's oxytocin that when you have this negative behavior up here, and then that negative behavior is being driven from this stress down here, which is turning on and driving that fear, which is driving more of that negative behavior. When you are able to recognize your own stress and perhaps your own fear in the midst of this negative behavior, you can take some deep breaths, you can slow down, you can get quiet, you can settle yourself, and as you do that, you start to turn on your own oxytocin response, which calms your own stress, which then moves you into a state of love, which then gives you the opportunity to address the behavior from a love-based perspective as opposed to a fear-based perspective. Because as long as you address this negative behavior with stress and fear, that's what you're going to get more of. But the moment you can start to shift and you can start to understand your own stress and fear, you're going to be able to move into love and trigger oxytocin, and that's the ultimate teaching. Sorry about that. My daughter just came and asked me if I'd like to have a chocolate chip muffin, and of course, I would love to have a chocolate chip muffin because dessert spelled backwards equals stress. So when you're stressed, sometimes you just need a little dessert. So I think that would be good to, to touch on oxytocin at this point, and then we'll be adding some slides to the oxytocin slides to the curriculum, so you'll have that and can expand on it a little bit more and pick up from there. Sound good, Helene?
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, let's move back to the PowerPoint now. Excellent. So which slide did you want to talk about?
This one's yours. The rest are mine.
Okay, great.
No, you didn't get to the purpose?
The purpose is after finding space. Well, I talked about the purpose, but you can talk about the purpose too.
Okay. So is mine?
Yep.
Okay. In teaching these classes, one of the purposes or one of the points of taking the instructor course is not only to teach you the manual, but also to assist you in beginning to run your own class and the steps to take in that process. One of the first steps when we laid out how to create your own presentation or create your own seminar, one of the first things to do is to find yourself a space. Find a local library. Those are usually free. Some colleges will provide some space. I think there's usually some cost, and if that's the case, there's no reason to do that. Local churches will usually give you free space, especially because you're running a free seminar. There are schools in your area, any human service agencies, or even in your living room. Flip. What we want people to understand is that this is a movement, not really so much a program, that we're trying to move this across the United States, and the ultimate goal is really to assist in the consciousness by creating a love revolution in every home, and really just to disseminate this information and have everybody understand that there's a whole new way to parenting. The class is designed, again, to be a group process and not a lecture, and ideally, the other point that we didn't touch on is ideally the classes in the 4 sessions give time people to process the information in between the class as well as it builds the group cohesion. participant costs. They need to have a GBB book, and we're strongly recommending a manual. I can't really see anybody feeling like they're part of the group unless they have a participant manual. If people want to share a manual, that's more than fine. As far as the Great Behavior Breakdown book, if they already have one, that's fine. It's the ticket into class. Not each person in a household has to have their own book. They can also purchase the book or the website prior to the class. This way you don't have to lay out any expenses for it or for the books or the workbooks. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. So they can order it from the website. And in the case that you won't make money unless you are a part of the affiliate program. So if you're part of the affiliate program, what's going to happen is that you'll get, I think, approximately 30% of those costs. If you're not and they buy it from the website, then they won't be able to. The bundle offer that we're giving to get everybody started is for free. You will receive an instructor's manual and 10 participant manuals. Any additional books you buy after that, to buy a replacement instructor's manual is going to be $15. When you buy a participant manual, it's $10 and you'll sell them at $15. In order to have the Great Behavior Breakdown books on hand, they are sold to you at $9.95, and then you can retail and sell them to your group for $19.95. You're going to use, when you go to order them, you're going to go to the postinstitute.com website, look under the resources and products, and you're going to use a coupon code for a Great Behavior Breakdown instructor, and that's what's going to give you the discount to $9.95. And then I believe, Brian, that we have Tim with us, and he's going to talk about the affiliate program.
Okay, great. Tim Nardoni, you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. We can hear you.
The affiliate program is actually pretty simple. It's just a big word for a simple concept. We make it where anyone who wants to sign up can basically promote products, and in the process of doing that, anyone who buys the products through the link that you promote it with will receive a commission. There's actually a place on the website to do this. You go to postinstitute.com and then click on Services at the top and choose Earn Money. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the section there that says, talks about the affiliate program and how to sign up. When you sign up, you'll receive an email that comes to whatever email address you put in with a special code that you'll include in every link that you send out, whether it's something you put in your email or whether it's something you post on your website or something you post on your blog. We can answer specific questions. The affiliate program, there tends to be questions of all stripes. You can email Tim at postinstitute.com anytime, and I'll do my best to respond to those right away. And people have common questions, I guess. People ask is, well, how do you promote that? What do you do with that link? And truthfully, you can attach that link to any web address that you send out that is part of the Post Institute website. So if you want to promote a certain book, maybe the new Fear to Love book, you could actually do a little write-up in an email, include a link to just that book with your affiliate number attached to that, and when you send that out, anybody who clicks on it and buys that book, you'll get a percentage of the sale. So email is obviously a very easy way to do that. Other ways to do that kind of promotion is through a blog. I highly recommend a blog. It's free, and there's lots of places on the internet where you can do that, like blogger.com or wordpress.com. Anyone who has a practice, I think, it does their client base a lot of good by writing. And you obviously not telling stories about your clients, but you can go out there and share experiences and find ways to keep people engaged with you as a therapist and as a trainer. And if you can embed this, links to different products in your writing, then you're going to increase the number of people that sign up and buy things through the Post Institute store. Other suggestions, just cursory, is promote your events on Facebook and Twitter and any other kind of event websites. Maybe you have a local, like your newspaper might have a website with a local calendar on it. Get it out there, put it out there, and use your affiliate link to do that. Again, the place to get that link is you'll go to the Services tab at postinstitute.com and click on Earn Money, and then scroll down. Now, for this program specifically, I know that some people are being encouraged to include a link to the Great Behavior Breakdown and the workbook so that people can buy their materials for the class this way. And we'll be sending out a instructional email here in the next day or so that explains how to do that. So all this will be documented for you. Anyone who has a question can email me or Helene, and we'll be sure to get you signed right up.
Excellent.
Helene, do you feel like that's a good overview?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I don't think I have any questions. I think one comment one therapist made was about taxes for therapists who are in who are considering this, or parents who are considering doing the affiliate programs. And I think one of your responses is to contact your CPA is the best thing, but also to realize that your affiliate profits are under a contractor basis. So it's basically like being a 1099 contractor. So those are monies that you have to pay taxes on. So otherwise, it's a good idea just to check in with your CPA and to tell them, what it's looking like, and they can give you the best tax advice.
Yes, and I'll add to that.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll add to that I think the way the shopping cart system works is you have to have, I think, $50 minimum in commission before they'll cut you a check. So I don't know how that all plays in. But basically, you'll get a check, and that's considered income, as far as I know. There's no sales tax or any weird stuff like that you have to collect. The sales tax is all handled by the website, but that check, if you get $1,000 a month from your affiliate sales, that's what Brian's talking about. You will have to pay. You're obligated to pay taxes on that. Talk to your accountant.
Excellent. Very
okay.
Good. I don't have any other questions on the affiliate program. Thank you very much, Tim Nardoni.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, gang, I think that brings us to a close, unless Helene has something more she wants to offer. Do you have anything, Helene?
No, I think that's it.
All right, and Helene's email address, and if you don't have it, is helene@postinstitute.com. You can reach me at Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, @postinstitute.com, and you can reach Tim at tim@postinstitute.com. So our next session, we'll be covering Session 2. We'll be talking a little bit more in depth about marketing your class, how and where to do it. So thanks for joining us.